All right. So a few more commission rules. This is the third one. We've got one more left after this, and then we'll have a little bit of time for questions. Language. I told you the story about how I went and lived with my grandparents because I didn't want to live in Louisiana. But anyway, my grandfather was a Nazarene minister. So this is the way I look at it. You can look at it however you want. If I wouldn't be proud to say it in front of my grandfather, the Nazarene minister, I'm not saying it on the radio. Okay? Only if I can look at Grandpa and talk to him and say it and not have to duck, it's good to go for the radio. So you're not allowed to use any indecent or obscene language on the radio. You'll find it on there. I'll be honest with you. You will find it on there in various different places, but it's prohibited. Music, unless you're waking up the astronauts, is prohibited. And we're not waking up any astronauts. Prohibited except, so for the purposes of the test, language, indecent or obscene language is prohibited at all times. Music, prohibited except when incidental to the retransmission of manned spacecraft communications, because they use music to wake up the astronauts. Encoded messages. So CW is code, but I mean, it's there, to be able to, it's public domain. Everybody has access to it. The same thing goes for FT8 and other things like that. The codec is there for you to be able to use it, so anybody can use it. So you can go ahead and use that, but you're not allowed to use a type of encryption that's supposed to keep your messages separate from everybody else. Encoded messages prohibited except when sending control commands to space stations or radio-controlled craft. How many people knew that flying a drone or a radio-controlled craft, if the frequency is in one of the amateur bands, you have to have a license? Okay. Anybody a drone pilot? Okay. I thought for some reason or other, I thought you were a drone pilot. Yeah, 'cause some of the things that you had mentioned made me think, he's flying. Okay, so countries, any country that has notified the ITU that it objects would be prohibited. So you wouldn't be able to talk to someone in a country where their government has told the ITU no. And actually they have to put in paperwork and notices and stuff like that. Currently, there is nobody on file that has told the ITU no. One step further beyond that, Yemen and North Korea don't allow, their countries are so great, they don't allow their citizens or subjects, whatever you want to call them, to talk on the radio. They're not allowed to communicate on radio because there's no boundaries for it. No, yeah. So it's because they're so great, they don't need to know what other people have, right? Okay, so I've talked to a few countries over in Eastern Bloc. It's kind of cool to get to talk to somebody over there. You get past the language barrier, and a lot of them over there speak really good English, but with an accent. All right. What, if any, are the restrictions concerning transmission of language that may be considered indecent or obscene? Any such language is prohibited. Thank you very much. Under what conditions is an amateur radio station permitted to transmit music using a phone emission? When incidental to the authorized retransmissions of manned spacecraft communications. When is it permissible to transmit messages encoded to obscure their meaning? Delta never. Oh, yeah. You know what? Yeah. I missed one question on the technician exam, and I know it was that one because I picked never every time. Only when transmitting control commands to space stations or radio-controlled craft, like a drone or a radio RC aircraft or boat or car. Yes, it should be. Yeah. With which countries are FCC licensed amateur radio stations prohibited from exchanging communications? I'm sorry? Alpha, any country whose administration has notified the International Telecommunications Union that it objects to such communications. I'm going to go back here one more time. Okay, remember this because this will trip you up on the exam just like it did me and just like it just did Greg. So, and technically, yeah. All right. Prohibited. Okay, you're not allowed to, with your amateur license, amateur means you're not making any money, right? Payment for operating a station is prohibited except communication incidental to classroom instruction. Now, the thing here is that you're, and this doesn't meet that requirement, okay? We're not allowed to charge for classes, so we don't. I mean, we do it because we love to have you guys here. I mean that. Okay, so payment for operating a station is prohibited except communication incidental to classroom instruction. So if you're doing some kind of demonstration at a school, I would not accept payment for it. I would do it for free, but young people are great to get into the hobby. So that would be a good thing. Sales, operating a station for business is prohibited. Now, if let's say I'm on the radio one day talking to my buddy over in Shreveport, and he says, man, I've got this 800 watt amp that I've been trying to sell, and it's just not getting much interest. And oh man, I've been looking for an 800 watt amp. How about if I jump on the motorbike and drive over there to Shreveport and pick it up? Okay, well, get in a Jeep and go pick it up. That is okay, but you can't run a business from there where that's all you're doing is buying and selling stuff on the radio. So operating a station for business is prohibited except when occasionally buying or selling amateur radio equipment. Okay, so 800 watt amp is amateur radio equipment, right? Okay, in which of the following circumstances may the control operator, which we haven't talked about yet, but we're going to here in a moment, in which of the following circumstances may the control operator of an amateur station receive compensation for operating that station? When the communication is incidental to classroom instruction at an educational institution. When may amateur radio operators use their stations to notify other amateurs of the availability of equipment for sale or trade? Delta, when selling amateur radio equipment and not on a regular basis. There are. There are. And that would make you wonder because if it's a net, that's what they do, right? Yeah. Occasional, once a week. Okay, so broadcasting is a one-way transmission for general public, and here is the key. It's for the general public. Broadcasting is something that's intended for everybody, not just us, but everybody. That's prohibited, except for immediate safety of human life or protection of property. International communications allowed. Before we move on to that, we're going to say, actually, we'll wait until it comes up here. International communications allowed. Communications incidental to the purposes of amateur radio service and remarks of a personal character. So if you were ever in the military, you understand the term loose lips sink ships. So there's some things that just should not be spoken over the airwaves, right? Or over telephone lines and stuff like that. But you can talk about amateur radio. You can talk about the weather. You can talk about the addition on your house that you're working on, things like that, okay? How does the FCC define broadcasting for the purposes of amateur radio service? Delta, transmission intended for the reception by the general public. Under which of the following circumstances are one-way transmissions by an amateur station prohibited? Broadcasting, okay? When may amateur stations transmit information in support of broadcasting, program production, or news gathering, assuming no other means is available? Alpha. When such communications are directly related to the immediate safety of human life or protection of property. Very good. What types of international communications are an FCC licensed amateur radio station permitted to make? Amateur radio news that rebroadcast frequently on repeater. Yeah. So they have all these rules, and then they go and they say, well, they don't apply to us. But yeah, ARRL puts a bulletin up online or over across the air a few times a month. So communications, okay, so communications incidental to the purposes of amateur radio service and remarks of a personal character. And yeah, I would say personal character would be the way to identify that one, but it has to be amateur radio service and remarks of a personal character. Control operator. Remember, I said we're going to talk about control operators here shortly. Who and what is the control operator? The station licensee by default. So after you get your license, and remember that your license is 2 licenses all in one, right? It's your station license and your operating license. But the station licensee, which will be you will be the control operator by default in the eyes of the FCC. You can designate a control operator if you're not, but I would avoid that. Always, a control operator is always required for the station operation. Any licensed amateur with appropriate privileges. So if you let somebody else talk on your radio, they have to observe their license, the privileges of their license. They can't enjoy yours. Any licensed amateur with appropriate privileges, accountable for proper operation as well as station licensee. So somebody else is talking on your station and they make a blunder, you're both responsible even though they were holding the mic, okay? Because it's your station. Accountable for proper operation as well as the station licensee. Space station operations. Any amateur with satellite uplink privileges. And what they're saying there is as long as it's in your frequency range, as long as it's in the range that you can operate. When may an amateur station operator transmit without a control operator? Sorry? Delta, never. Always have to have a control operator. And we're going to talk about the exception to that in a minute. Who does the FCC presume to be the control operator of an amateur station? Delta, the licensee. Who must designate the station control operator if they're not going to control their own station? Alpha, the station licensee. When the control operator is not the station licensee, who is responsible for the proper operation of the station? Control operator and the licensee, yes. Who is accountable if a repeater inadvertently retransmits, and this is a big one, who is accountable if a repeater inadvertently retransmits communications that violate the FCC rules? Who's that? Okay, so Delta. It may be argued that if it continues over a long period of time and they're not shut down, that the repeater owner would get in trouble for it. But normally, it's just the originating station. Okay, and we're going to talk about why that is here in just a moment. When under normal circumstances, may a technician class licensee be the control operator of a station operating in an extra class band segment? At no time, that is correct. Who may be the control operator of a station communicating through an amateur satellite or space station? Any amateur allowed to transmit on the satellite uplink frequency. These are the types of control operators. Okay, you've got a control point, which is where the control function is performed, and for most of the time, that's going to be right there at the desk where you have your radio. That's your control point. And you've got three different control types. You've got a local control, remote control, and automatic. Now, local control means you're sitting at your desk with your radio mic in hand and doing everything right there, and it's all self-contained. Remote means that you're indirectly manipulating radio through the internet or through phone lines or something like that. So you're not actually at the control point, but you're controlling things remotely. Then you've got automatic, which is how repeaters operate. Everything is automatic, so it's controlled by all the computers and gadgetry there. So this is why, since everything is automatic, if somebody says a bad word through the repeater and the repeater repeats it, that's why it's only the originating station that's going to get in trouble. I have heard instances where they tried to say because it continued over a long period of time, the station should have been notified and shut the repeater down so that it wouldn't continue. That depends on the day and the time, I guess. For automatic control, when the control operator is not present at the control point, you've got your repeater and you've got devices and procedures that control everything. What is an amateur station's control point? The location at which a control operator function is performed, which is an example of remote control as defined in Part 97. I'm going to say, well, no, because repeater is not remote controlled. It's automatic. Bravo, operating the station over the internet. Which of the following are required for remote control operation? Control operator must indirectly manipulate the controls. Okay. So control operator must be... Yeah, well, you're at the control point if you're... Because the control point is where you're manipulating the controls from, right? Let's go back to that a minute. What's that? Location at which a control operator, what is a control point? The location at which a control operator function is performed. Control operator must be at the control point. Control operator is required at all times, and the control operator must indirectly manipulate the controls. Okay, which of the following is an example of automatic control? Alpha, repeater operation. Let's see. Takeaways. Authorized and prohibited transmissions, no indecent or obscene language. Transmission of music via phone is permitted when incidental to the authorized retransmission of manned spacecraft communications. Encoded transmissions are permitted only when transmitting control commands to space stations or radio-controlled craft. Let's see, restricted countries are prohibited, and that is any country whose administration has notified the ITU that it objects to such communications. Authorized and prohibited transmissions, let's see, compensation is permitted only when the communication is incidental to classroom instruction at an educational institution. Sales are permitted when selling amateur radio equipment and not on a regular basis. Broadcasting is prohibited except for the immediate safety of human life or protection of property. It's called a QST. Okay, so QST, when you say you've got a QST, you key up your mic, you say, I've got a QST for all the hams southbound on 95. It has become a parking lot, so try to get off before you reach it. That's a QST. You're trying to immediate safety of human life or protection of property, okay? International communications are permitted when incidental to the purpose of amateur radio service and remarks of a personal character. Control operator and control types. Station licensee by default. The control operator function can be designated by the station licensee if that person will not be doing it for themselves. Always required for station operation, any licensed amateur with the appropriate frequency privileges for the job. Accountable for operation as well as the station licensee. So if you designate somebody and they mess up, you're both responsible. Space station or satellite operation, any amateur can send messages to the space station or to a satellite, provided you have privileges for the frequency for that uplink. And that is important, uplink. When you push to talk and you start speaking, that's the uplink going up to the satellite or space station. You have to have privileges on that. You don't have to have privileges on the downlink because all you're doing is listening. Okay? Control operator and control types. Control point is the location at which the control operator function is performed. Remote control, operating the station over the internet. The control operator must be at the control point. The control operator is required at all times. The control operator must indirectly manipulate the controls. For automatic control, that is repeater, the control operator is not present at the control point, and repeater operation is all automatic and it's an example of automatic control. Any questions? Okay.